Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm a bit sick, so my voice will be not as good. I'm not saying my voice normally is good. But okay, so as I was saying, I do plan on still refuting Har Sultan's book, The Curse of God, and this will be the next part of it. I know it has been a while. The reason I have slowed down is because I am extremely busy with my studies, my alim course, my philosophy lectures that I do and I take, and also just my general studies. So, with that being said, inshallah, hopefully I'll try to be more consistent. So, in this video, I will be refuting Har Sultan's books, chapter 3. In chapter 3, he basically talks about the baggage of titled as the baggage of religion. He's the first 2 pages is basically him talking about how not every religious person is bad, but some religious people are good as well. But then he goes on and talks about how religion causes people to be bad, or the fact that the religious people expect others to conform with their worldviews. This causes problems, and they are fundamentalist, which causes issues and basically ridding people of their quote unquote rights. Uh, so that was the first 2 pages. And then moving on to the third page. And then he also goes on to say that religion gives people a set of rules that they have to follow. And they basically say that they have to do what God said because God created them. And basically, he goes on to say that he got the rules, the pages of rules that are there in the Holy Scripture. They stop them, or are strict conditions against sexual behavior, how you treat your children and wives, and so on and so forth. And then he goes on to call these conditions and rules as baggage of religion. There's a very amazing verse in the Quran that describes people like this. And then Haris Sultan goes on in the next page, page 40 and 41. He talks about that he would like to take it back to the 17th century. Basically, he starts talking about the Pascal wager. So Pascal was a French mathematician and philosopher who proposed the Pascal wager, or Pascal's gambit. So Pascal's wager is basically that if you believe in God, you will get eternal paradise, and you might suffer here. Harris goes on to argue and refute, or try to refute, the Pascal wager. So at the end of his book, end of his page number 40, he says, how can Pascal claim that it will not make any difference if you turn out to be wrong by believing in the ideology? What Pascal here is trying to say that when compared to infinity, it really does not make a difference, because anything compared to infinity is basically null, so doesn't really matter. You see, that is the point that he's trying to allude to. If you actually studied basic logic and reasoning and mathematics, you might understand this, Harsh. So then in the next page, he goes on to say the Quran encouraged the idea of suicide bombing and stuff like that. So he basically tries to say that if he accepts the Quran, then he's going to do these horrendous things. So like suicide bombing, killing, attacks, human right violation, so on and so forth. Then he goes on to say, moreover, Pascal proposition is absurd, as it also supposes that his God is the only correct God. So first of all, him saying that he will do absurd things, he is tormenting the Muslim position on fiqh. Haris, you have not studied Islamic law. You literally said in your debate with Daniel that the knowledge that you got of fiqh is from pamphlet. So this is not your league. Stay out of it. So, and regarding Pascal's proposition being absurd, not really, because Pascal is not arguing against God. He's just arguing against disbelief in God. So no matter what God you believe, it is still more rational to believe in God than not believe in God, because believing in God will give you an infinite amount of pleasure compared to pain. Okay? And infinity, when compared to finitude, is way far greater, and the finite becomes null in comparison to the infinity. So yeah, sorry about that. So let's move on from there. So he goes on to say, if you adopt the method B, once again, previous video, I refuted his understanding of these two concepts of these method A and B and how it's an absurd way of reasoning. So he goes on to say, if we assume Pascal wager is correct, believe in God to save ourselves from eternity in burning, then that he will abide by these rules to avoid hell. And so he is assuming that he will suffer in this world and then he will be rewarded pleasure in the hereafter. And he uses Pascal's reasoning, by the way. And then he says something really weird. He says, I shall only discuss the Islamic God. Why are you using a non-Muslim argument to assert a Islamic belief? Why are you even talking about the Pascal wager right now? You seem a bit confused, Horace. So then he goes on throughout his book talking about the laws that Islam tells you to abide by. Then he talks about the Taliban, the horrendous acts that are done by some of the Muslims, and how hypocritical some Muslims are. This is all in his page 42. So, and then he goes on to even add on that, however, since I'm buying Pascal's idea of God, along with all his rules, I shall live a life without any music created or sung by a female or any romantic song sung by a male. Yeah, what's the problem with that, Horace? I don't see a problem with that. You just want to hear women sing. You just sound like a creep now. You literally sound like a creep. And then he goes on to blah blah blah, say, thanks to Pascal wager, I now believe in Allah and all his rules and know that 999 God are false. No, that's not what Pascal wager is really for. Pascal wager, at least in modern conception, isn't. So once again, you should at least try to streamline the argument. And no one says that by the Pascal wager you disprove, okay, or you need to believe or you need to know the rest of the gods are false. You just assume it, you can say. Now he goes on to say that I will not look at any moving pictures and blah blah blah. Once again, your understanding of fiqh is very absurd, not good. He gives what do you say? He gives a hadith. The severest of penalties on the day of the resurrection will be given to image maker. Yes, and once again, looking at pictures is haram. You cannot derive that from this hadith. So once again, you're showing how you're not knowledgeable on fiqh and how to derive ruling from hadith and the Quran, a hadith and the Quran. For example, I'll tell you why your reasoning is invalid. The hadith says the severest or the penalties on the day of resurrection will be given to the image maker. Looking at the picture is haram, cannot be taken out from this hadith. That ruling cannot be taken out from this hadith. Okay, the making of the image is haram. Okay, but looking at the image is not. So for example, worshipping an idol is wrong, but looking at a worshipper or looking at a guy who worships an idol or looking at an idol itself is not really haram if you just look at those verses on the Quran and the Hadith. So once again, Haris, your understanding is very flawed. And then he goes on to say, this is the reason why Muslim get so worked up about the cartoon of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Not really. This is also a straw man and a position. See, if someone loved the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam so much, he loved him a lot, and he was jahil. Let's say he was jahil. He didn't know about the rulings of the Quran and Sunnah, and he drew or attempted to draw Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in a beautiful manner. We wouldn't be really that angry at him because he is jahil. He is ignorant about what are the rulings. We would just correct him. Okay, and we will say that this, you don't know how Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam looks like. You cannot draw him. It is prohibited, and we would discard of the drawing. That's all. The reason that we do get mad at the drawings of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam nowadays is because they depict him in a absurd, horrendous, and offensive manner. You get the point, Harris? Stop strawmanning Muslims. And then he tries, try to be funny. Maybe Muhammad wasn't very photogenic. Ya jahil, ya jahilun. Being a true Muslim. And then he goes on. Basically, this whole chapter, what he ends up doing is show absurd positions of the Muslims. Some of the most extreme positions of the Muslim. He cherry picks every single ayat and hadith and scenarios and views of Muslims, and then he uses the most that are most controversial to today's day and age that go against the quote-unquote norm of today, and then he tries to show his readers how, using the Pascal wager, he will show that he needs to follow all these absurd things that will ruin not only his life but the lives of others. Then by the end of the chapter, in page 52, he writes, in conclusion, since it is wiser to believe in God and his rules, I would have never heard of Madonna or Noor Jahan, watched Tom Hanks or Shah Rukh Khan, and instead I would have stoned a lot of men and women to death, possibly waged a war on other humans for someone's political or economic greed, and probably died prematurely. Okay, so once again, Haris, what type of argument are you trying to make? You're making a emotional argument, which is pretty clear. Okay, if you're making a rational argument, you watching Shah Rukh Khan or Tom Hanks, listening to Madonna or Noor Jahan, is irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the truth. Okay, it is absolutely irrelevant. Okay, and then you go on to say, I would have stoned a lot of men and women to death. What are you trying to say? So, once again, Haris, you're making an argument from emotion. You need to prove why such laws are absolutely objectively wrong to even assert a negative connotation to them. You get it? You get what I'm trying to say? Or is it too much for you, Haris? And once again, very bad argumentation. Didn't even refute Pascal wager. And then when we go to his page 44, the entirety of Pascal wager revolves around the central claim of perceived fear of hell's existence. Not really. It does not really have to do with just the perceived fear of hell's existence. It really has to do with the wager or the gambit. Okay, that's why it is called Pascal's wager or Pascal's gambit or gambling, because as a rational person, your goal would be to reach or take a position in which you're most likely to win, and that is why it is a gambit. Being a theist is the most probable to assure your victory or have the best outcome. That would be better, saying it would be the best outcome or best possible outcome would be to be a theist, according to Pascal. That is what the Pascal wager really revolves around, not just the fear of hell's existence. Even if there was no hell, in Pascal's wager, and it was just, you suffer in this world and you get eternity of pleasure in the next world, or you have pleasure in this world and you get nothing in the next world. Still, Pascal wager some would conclude that the first option is more rational, because once again, infinite pleasure is way greater, far greater. And when you bring in hell to this, the probability just outweighs completely towards one side. So that is what really is going on here. So yes, stop calling the religion myths without making any good argument. It has been 3 chapters of your book and still no good argument. I hopefully in the next chapter, the God hypothesis, you will be giving some valid type of arguments, Harris. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you guys liked it. I'll try to make more videos often. And ma salama.